Hey YouTube, Grimscore11 here. Today I'm going to be showing you guys a deck profile of my fun deck for the next 6 months because the format is absolutely trash. I think the ban list actually made this game worse than it was, but that's besides the point. Anyways, the deck is Empty Jar, so yeah, I'm just going to run through the deck and my thoughts on it. The one thing that I do want to say is that Morphing Jar is better than I gave it credit for. The entire deck is better than I thought it was going to be. I figured it was going to be really inconsistent and really not worth even playing, but like for a fun deck, it's really, really good. Now, a lot of my, like the entire deck, like mine, is almost entirely highest rarity, except for Book of Moon. I still have the rare one. I haven't gotten a CP one or a Turbo Pack one yet, but you can build the entire deck for like $50, I want to say. Like, it'll just be really de-blinged. Like $50-$60 you can build the entire deck. So yeah, anyways, it'll be like Common Jar and stuff like that, but I just want to throw that out there. The deck is actually cheaper to play than it appears. So anyways, I'm going to go ahead and get into it. Morphing Jar, obviously. Now, my variation plays the Tour Guide engine, so that's 3 Tour Guide and Sangan, clearly, but, yeah, you don't have to play these. You can just play, instead of Tour Guides, you can just play Deep Diver, and I don't have, my copies of Deep Diver aren't within reach, so I can't show you guys what it is, but basically, instead of doing what Tour Guide does, it just, when it's destroyed by battle, you pick a monster out of your deck and set it on top. You take the monster and put it on top of your deck so you draw it next turn. So it's a good way to search out Jar. But with this deck, Tour Guide, I don't really use Tour Guide all that often, honestly. You can actually, I side it out a whole lot because I never really need it. But Tour Guide, Summon Sangan is about as far as I go with Tour Guide, unless I activated Gold Sark and removed Jar from play, and then made Leviair and Special Summon Jar. So yeah, that's basically, like, Tour Guide isn't necessary in this deck by any means. It's just, it just makes it like a little bit better. Alright, and then the next monsters, 380 Changer, possibly my favorite monster in the entire deck. It's Book of Taiyu in monster form, and it's not broken, but it speeds up the deck, makes the deck really consistent. It's really, really good. That's all like, discarding this for like the cost of a Feather of the Phoenix or a Magical Stone Excavation is pretty insane. So, and then the last ones are Swift Scarecrows. These are the last monsters, because you can always open up really horrible hands, and then Swift Scarecrow will help you. Like, you're gonna take damage, obviously, this deck, because it doesn't play a whole bunch of defense, but Swift Scarecrow will help you stall out until you draw into your combo pieces. So yeah, that's all the monsters. Now on to spells. You play 3-Pot of Duality. You play 3-Pot, obviously, just to help with the consistency issues of the deck. The deck is fairly consistent without Duality anyways, but Duality never hurt anybody, so you might as well just play 3. It's really, really good. And next you play Feather of the Phoenix. So, with the Feather of the Phoenix, you activate it, you discard a card, and then you put a card out of your graveyard on top of your deck. So, it helps you, if you're not going to be able to keep flip-flopping Jar, you just put whatever you need on top of the deck, flip Jar, and draw it. That's mainly what this card is used for. So far, like, in all my testing, that's what I use it for, mostly. 3 Magical Mallet, clearly. It's just to put stuff back into your deck and then try and draw new stuff. You just put the same number back and then draw. So yeah, Magical Mallet. It's actually a really nice looking super too. Because I haven't played a deck that used Magical Mallet in about a year. If you guys look back at like my Exodia deck, I used Magical Mallet. That was back when I started, when I was like terrible at this game. Not that I'm that much better now. Anyways, 3 Gold Sark. Obviously, it's just to remove Jar. Like, get Jar to your hand, get Heavy Storm to your hand. Heavy Storm is decently important in this deck, just because, well, a lot of stuff that you're going to want a Heavy Storm out of the way doesn't really affect this deck too much, but it doesn't really hurt to Heavy Storm. The only thing is just be wary with Starlight Road, even though if you can like OTK them in that one turn. Stardust doesn't really matter. Okay, next up, 3 Book of Eclipse. This is like a broken Book of Moon in this particular deck, not in all decks. Book of Eclipse flips all monsters on the field face down. And then during the end phase, all the face down monsters your opponent controls are flipped face up, and they draw a card for each one. So you use it to flip Jar face down, and then in the end phase your opponent is going to have to draw cards, like they don't have a choice. So it helps them mill their deck faster. Ruling that it's kind of important about this card that I don't know if anybody's going to wonder about it or not. When you activate multiple Book of Eclipse in one turn, your opponent will only draw for one, because the lingering effect of the first one will activate, flip their monsters face up, and then they'll draw for those. And then when the second one goes to activate, no flipping will occur, so no draws occur. So that's basically the only ruling about this card that's important. This is the only card in the entire deck that actually has something a little confusing about it. Okay, Book of Taiyu. It's just target a face down monster, flip it back up. So it's just to keep flip-flopping Jar. Not a whole lot of explanation needed. One Day of Peace is another stall card. So you activate it, you draw a card, your opponent can't kill you on their turn. That's basically all it's for. This card is really good. They did a really good job putting this Photon Shockwave and helping burn decks and stall decks. So it's just a really good card. And then the last 3 of is Upstart Goblin. Now, not only does it make it like you're playing 37 cards, but since the win condition doesn't revolve around reducing your opponent's life points to 0, it does not hurt you at all to activate Upstart Goblin. Alright, 2 of is Magical Stone Excavation, or Magical Stone Excavation. This card is insane. If it was at 3, this deck would be a little bit, it'd be a little bit more consistent, but at 2 it's fine. But the card is just really good. So you discard 2 cards, and then you add a spell card from your graveyard to your hand. So if you can't keep flip-flopping Jar, if you need a Book of Taiyu or a Book of Eclipse, or even if you need like a Feather of the Phoenix or something, Magical Stone Excavation, flip-flop, like get it back to your hand, just keep flipping your Jar. So it's really good. And then the one-ofs are Book of Moon, which is like a subpar Book of Eclipse in this deck, and then Heavy Storm and Card Destruction. Now I just want to say something about Card Destruction real quick. Even though you do a lot of milling to your opponent anyways, Card Destruction will help you mill more cards, because you're going to be losing cards at the same time that your opponent is if you're activating Morphing Jar a whole bunch. This will help put your opponent 2 or 3 cards ahead of you if you play it right. And by that, what I mean is, okay, so you both have 5 cards in hand. Card Destruction is one of them. After you activate it, you're only going to be discarding 4 cards and drawing 4 anyways. But if you can set any number of cards out of your hand, like you set 3 cards, then you're only discarding 1 and drawing 1, while your opponent is discarding 5 and drawing 5. So they'll have less cards in their deck than you. So it'll make your job of milling their entire deck that much easier. So Card Destruction is better in this deck than it is in most, I want to say. If you can draw into it, you have a really, like if you draw into it early on enough, it'll make your job a whole lot easier. Okay, now that's basically the entire main deck. The side deck is almost complete. I'll just talk about that when I get to it. Alright, so 2 Lava Golems. You have to be able to answer Xian and Cherry Beast, because this deck can't do anything to those. So Lava Golem definitely helps stop that. And your opponent is not going to be able to kill you, because you can Swift Scarecrow, you can activate 1 Day of Peace, and you can recycle those cards with a Feather of the Phoenix. So you can stall out with Lava Golem if you have to. And then 2 Morphing Jar number 2. This is the same thing, it's answers to problematic monsters. So Morphing Jar number 2, it makes you shuffle all monsters that are on the field back into their respective decks. And then both players pick up cards equal to the number of monsters that they shuffled back into the deck. And all the level 4 or lower monsters are put on the field face down, and all of the ones that are above level 4 get discarded to the graveyard. So speeds up milling, helps you answer problem monsters. Not much more to say about that. And then you side 3 MSTs to try and hit some back rows before you start flip-flopping jar, because your opponent, it's hard for them to answer jar if you don't manually flip it. They can't warning it, they can't torrential, you know, they can't do any of that stuff. But if you have to, you're going to want MST to try and make it so you can safely flip your jar. Alright, now, a main thing that I thought about when making the deck, which this is a common side deck card, is Dimensional Fissure. And I thought about this because Dark World have to be discarded to the graveyard, obviously, to activate. Because you would think Dark World would plus infinite amounts, but if you side in Dimensional Fissure, there's nothing they can really do. They have to respond with an MST, which typically Dark World doesn't main deck, so yeah. And then 3 Royal Decrees to stop traps, just TGs, stuff like that, get wrecked by it. The TG matchup isn't particularly too hard, and the reason I mentioned the TG matchup is because not only can they skill drain you, which you can play around, you can, if you flip jar face up and then immediately chain something to jar's effect flip face down, like Book of Moon or Book of Eclipse, then it'll go face down and it'll still resolve face down because skill drain can only stop face up effects. And then another thing is TG1, EM1. I was playing a game yesterday and they EM1 my Morphing Jar. So what I did was I kept flipping jar up and down on their side of the field, and I did lose that game. I lost it because I couldn't mill the last 5 cards on his deck, but it just shows that maybe if I had played more conservatively, or like calculated the EM1, because that's the first time I got EM1 out of like 6 games. If I thought about that, I maybe could have won that game. It's just that you can keep flip-flopping jar on their side of the field and making you both discard. So creature swap and EM1 aren't that big of a deal, but you have to be able to play around that stuff. And then the last 2 side deck cards are blanks, because I'm unsure what I'm going to side deck these 2 as. Nico Main King is a huge possibility. That was a really neat tech. I like the side deck. The side deck, like, this is practically a net deck from YCS Atlanta's Top 16 MTGR deck, just because I really liked it and it's a good deck. But anyways, yeah, Nico Main King. I was also thinking about Macrocosmos just to help stop anything that's graveyard reliant, which God knows the top, like 2 of the top 3 decks are graveyard reliant. So yeah, anyways, as far as the extra deck goes, you really only need like 1 or 2 Leviers. Everything else you can put in some Troll fusions like Flame Swordsman for all it matters. But yeah, this has been my empty jar deck. That's my thoughts on the deck. It's not like broken, it's not tier 0 as I've heard it described before, but it is fun and it's good and it's decently consistent. And if you go first and you open Not Horrible, you can FTK. It's hilarious. People get so mad. I'm playing this deck at Regionals for sure. I'm going to Louisville Regionals on the 17th of next month, and I am without a doubt playing this deck. It's going to be so much fun. But anyways, leave your comments, questions below. Until next time, I'll see you guys.